Here. Um, if I am talking about security gaps in early stages of software engineering, I have this graphic here and I can talk about the requirements, the system design, implementation, testing, deployment, how these all contribute to that title. But if we move forward, then I can say I'm focusing on the requirements and the system design specifically in my research. And some more graphics if I'm telling the story. There's some more. I can say that the requirements specifically focus on system functionality, and our system design is from software engineers, but they're not security experts. So we know that this here is, and then there's another graphic, error-prone design. So if we're using graphics like this, it really helps us walk people through the slide and help us tell that story in pieces so that they're not overwhelmed. Okay, this was the one that I said I needed to emphasize. So long text can confuse or distract your audience, but there needs to be enough text to help your audience follow along. Tip colorful boxes can help compartmentalize and emphasize text. So the reason I emphasize this so much is because if you're looking at a presentation where you have paragraphs, you have smaller text, they're the judges are not going to be paying as much attention to you as they are to your slide and trying to actually read everything that you've given them. And this also goes for graphics. If you're giving them too much at one time, it can be distracting and they won't be listening to you. They'll be reading your slide. It helps the overall clarity of your presentation. And when we're talking about telling that story, it's important that you walk these people through all the pieces of that story. And if it's just a big cloud of text, one, they're not going to be able to read all of it anyway. And two, they'll get lost in that and then lost in your story. Here is an example of that. We have a big box of text and we have a big chart. We have done some coloring to make things stand out a little bit, but it's just a really busy slide. So the next slide shows how we can break that down a little bit further. So the wording, we've gotten a little bit more picky about which words we want to use. And we've also broken that up into different sections. Another thing was with the graph, the colors that we're using now kind of make things stand out differently. And we can compare what's in each box over to the colors that I've highlighted in that table. For the next slide, if we're using graphics, even with this amount of text, you can see that it can be a lot. If you just click through the graphics, there's just a lot of information. And when you're presenting your entire slide deck in 8 minutes, you don't really have time to be spending on one slide. So just keep these things in mind. If we go back to the example that was a little better, this next one, or yeah. Um, did you go back or forward? The next, yeah, this one. So here, walking along the story, we can say the most common defects are ambiguous sentence and incomplete sentences, and highlight those in the table. And we have a little box that says that. And then we have least common defects, implicit subject, multiple sentences, weak phrase. And we can see those are all 0%. And they've been highlighted really well. And then the last one, grammatically correct requirements, has less defects. And then we have that table where we're pointing out those percentages. Another great way to kind of call out data in graphs or in tables is you can use big boxes so that they're focusing on one line of your table. You can use circles if you're looking at a graph, big arrows. Again, don't be including too much and help out the judges as much as possible when it comes to your slides in showing them exactly what they should be looking for at the time that you're telling them. I personally don't use too many graphics, but I went to a defense, I think like a year ago. The best presentation graphically I've ever seen, and I need to get on that level, but right now I'm not, so I kind of stay away from them. But here we've highlighted different ways that they can really be beneficial, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So, like we were discussing, animations aren't always necessary, but they can be a nice touch. Too many animations can definitely be distracting. Having 1 to 2 slides with big animations can help make a point, and then printed slides don't have animations. So, if you're submitting to a conference and they ask you to provide them with a PDF so that they can lump all the presentations together, then you'll need to kind of be mindful that any animations that you have through this presentation are not going to be highlighted when they're showing your slides. I'll go back to Shep because this is the best example that I have. We brought our own computers and we were able to connect to the screen ourselves. I Funny story. I was surprised I won because I had a lot of technical difficulties and timing issues. I was told a different time and I got there and they were like, "Oh, you're up." And I was going to run through my slides a little bit more, but they were like, "It's your turn." So I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." I set everything up and kind of locked in as quick as I could. But as I was clicking through the slides, because I was using the web browser, so I don't recommend, it closed out of my presentation, brought me back to the first slide. Mind you, I still only have 8 minutes, and I had to kind of reorganize everything, get back to the slide I was on, and continue to tell that story. Um, Hope that doesn't happen to you. But yeah, literally at the end of the presentation, I was like, I did what I needed to do, and at least it's done because I couldn't have helped those things. But there are definitely things that you won't be able to foresee. But if you're practicing your presentation, um, you can kind of work with those things. But here, back to the animations. If I'm talking about GitHub and I want to highlight news sources, I can use animations to kind of show that we have this piece of information and that, and these all contribute to whatever I'm saying about GitHub. But keeping in mind, if I'm submitting a PDF, I would split up the slides. I'd have one talking about that GitLab and the other one talking about those news headlines because I was covering things. Just something to keep in mind. Okay, so Um, try to simplify images and tables. Some images and tables can get pretty complicated, as we saw before. Adding emphasis through animations can help redirect attention, similar to text, and sometimes it makes sense to cover part of an image. Using symbols can also emphasize specific types of information. Like I was mentioning before, I presented on shakedown tests that I had done. So basically, testing out our setup and our system and our parameters to make sure everything that was going to work for the actual tests. I had done maybe 13 tests, and the ones that contributed to the story that I was telling was maybe 3 or 4 of the tests. I included a table that showed probably 7 out of the 13. Some of those tests were repeats. So if you have some repeats, kind of choose which one worked best for your data. Maybe there were errors in another one. And you can kind of simplify a table in that way. And I had the table on one slide by itself. The data that I highlighted was in a big red box. So it was really simple to walk through. And then I later had to show a graph that highlighted kind of the tests that were important. And I had a graph with only two of the tests that I was presenting on. Um, if I had included everything, I would have had like more than a rainbow's worth of colors, worth of lines, and it just would have been really busy. So that's what we're trying to get you to really stay away from, is really busy slides. They're just more confusing than they are beneficial. And I understand that everything is important, but again, you only have 8 minutes. So you want to be able to work with every slide and make everyone just as important. So going back to this example, as we've talked about, um, using these boxes really helps break things up. We also reduced the amount of text, so that was another way. And these colors really help connect the data to the words that you're saying. You could also just have the table, not have the words, and you could just say in the red, we're highlighting ambiguous sentence and incomplete sentence, and this is why that's important. And then in the blue, we have kind of how those are grammatically correct requirements have less defects. But these are all kind of ways to simplify your tables and graphs and just slides in general. The next slide shows kind of if we didn't have those colors, how everything kind of blends together. Even if we're using bold text, not really enough to call out what you're looking at. For presentations, the screen is bigger, but it's a little further. So you also have to keep that in mind. And just try your best to simplify as much as possible. We're going to go through another example of like a busy slide and how all of these things are important. But if you really need to include all of this information, you can use animations to highlight different pieces. If I first want to talk about like the generator, there's a box that goes around it. Yeah. And then I can say like the generator leads to pre-trained MLE models. Um, if I wanted to simplify this further, I might just put that system in one slide by itself. And in this example, we're highlighting the middle section, talk more about that, lead people through your story as we were mentioning. And then that information then leads to the bottom discriminator. And then I can talk about all of that. If we wanted to separate those pieces, this is a different graphic that kind of breaks up what the other one presented. And kind of don't be afraid to do that. I know some graphics in literature can sometimes hold a lot of information, but can be beneficial. You can summarize those graphics in ways that you need to. Here, we're still talking about the generator, we're still talking about the discriminator, but we've minimized the wording and kind of minimized the graphic as well. Okay, landing the plane. Make sure you finish your presentations gracefully. You can summarize, recap, or provide key takeaways, and then always thank the audience for their attention and ask for questions. If a Q&A is allowed, sometimes they'll say you have 8 minutes to present, 2 minutes for a Q&A, and you'll just have that last slide be Q&A. But when we're talking about finishing your presentations gracefully, you want to kind of come full circle with the story that you were telling. When you're starting your presentation, you're talking about that motivation, how your research contributes to the research question that you're answering. And then in that last few slides, you want to talk about the results, how those results show that you answered your research question, and then how this overall will help the motivation that you're looking to highlight in your presentation. Also, connecting it back to why it's important to um, the judges, the general population, the science community. It depends on the audience that you're speaking to. You can summarize, recap, or provide key takeaways. If you have a lot of slides, you can always say, like, in summary, these are the methods that we tested, and these are the results that proved our research question to be true or false or worth investigating. All of those can be kind of important pieces um, to what you're looking to address. Bonus tips. Um, Plan for time. I always recommend practicing your presentations before you give them. I've thankfully had a lot of opportunities to speak in front of big crowds throughout undergrad, and that's gotten me pretty comfortable with presenting, minimizing my ums and likes. Sometimes those can be really distracting. So also present in front of a friend maybe so that when you're presenting, they'll be able to call out your ums and likes. Sometimes I don't even realize that I'm saying them, but if you're getting too caught up in your slide, you're getting nervous, you think that you got off track or forgot to mention something, you can get distracted in your own head and just after after I've seen it happen multiple times. But if you're practicing the presentation, you're really getting comfortable with what's on your slides, that's not going to happen as often. Another thing that's going to help with that is starting off with an outline to structure your talk. So you can say, okay, this slide is going to be motivation, this slide is going to be methods, these slides are going to be results, this one conclusion. If you're thinking about a minute per slide, if you have 8 minutes, try and keep it to 8 slides, depending on how much you're including in each slide. But it's also really helpful to have an outline. If you're doing like a presenter mode, you can have your slides on one screen. I used like the big screen that was facing the judges, but the other screen had my notes. It had what the next slide was going to be. And in my notes, I don't have word for word a script of what I want to say. If you have word for word a script you want to say and you miss one word, you're going to spiral. Like, I don't know if you'll spiral, but I would spiral. So I kind of have bullets of what I want to mention, what I want to walk through. And that really helps me from getting distracted myself in all the information that I've given me myself. Because those scripts, as much as they're useful, and you can start with a script, once you are actually comfortable with that and presenting, keep it to bullets. Because, like I said, if you miss one word and you're like, oh, what was that word that I was supposed to say, or a specific sentence that I wanted to say it the way I wanted to say it, it can just be really distracting to you as a presenter. This goes into being smart about your notes and your cues. If you have that screen with your notes, you can see what's next and kind of use the first slide to lead into the next slide. So you have a cohesive presentation, and that'll help with the flow of the story that you're telling. Like I said, be sure to practice. I don't know about your individual universities, but there are usually empty rooms in the buildings that I work in. You can always take those, connect up to the screen. Like I said, invite a friend so they can give you feedback, and you're not presenting the same thing that could have been improved again and again. They'll help you improve. It can be a little nerve-wracking, but if you're presenting kind of first by yourself, you can present for timing, you can present for how well you used your own notes. You could also consider kind of how long each slide takes you, and if you want to change that up before practicing in front of other people, that's that's all going to help. One, you get really comfortable with your presentation, but also speaking in front of other people and making sure that you actually know each slide fairly well. Bring water. I'm dehydrated, so I'm gonna take a sip. But if you're giving 30 minutes, 45 minutes in some of your conferences, um, these things can be really draining and you're going to be talking a lot. And it doesn't hurt to take a sip of water. I've heard some people say that when they're kind of loading and they're thinking through another piece of their slides, they'll take a sip of water and use that as their excuse to kind of think a little bit more. Um, it's helped me in the past for sure. And overall, I hope this covers everything that you'll need for giving your next presentations. Um, I assume there will be time for questions if anyone has them. But if you have any questions, if you want to practice in front of me, I'll be more than happy to send me an email, a DM on Instagram. Hopefully this helps you guys out. Any water.
Thank you so much, Lara. That was amazing. Yeah, I definitely have, I like get very nervous when I'm presenting. So I definitely like talk very fast and then I'll stutter and then it all goes crashing and burning.
I also just start talking really fast. That's how I just speak. As I was giving this presentation, I was like, oh, wait, I need to slow down. And you can change how you're working through your presentation, but that's only if you're comfortable enough with your slides to kind of think of all these things at the same time. If you're so focused on one thing, then you're just kind of gonna run through it all.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I'm gonna just go over some closing remarks and then we open it up for like Q&A in case anyone has any questions. But thank you so much, Lara, for doing this. We have a couple of upcoming events. So Region 4 and the SHEP DC Professional Chapter, we're doing a in-person like networking social. It's gonna be at Casa's Rum and Bar. It will be posted tomorrow on our Instagram, and I also send out emails about this. So if anyone's able to come, please come. For grad series, like in about 25 minutes, this will be starting. So if you're interested about learning about self-advocacy and student success. This is an event that's being hosted by Shep National, so it's being hosted by I'm not sure who's presenting, but I think it's a really good one, especially when you like are trying to figure out how to like speak for yourself. And then later on this week, the RGRs, we are hosting a panel, a three series panel. So the first one is Careers in Industry, and it's gonna be on Friday at 8 p.m. East, so 5 p.m. Pacific. Um, so this one should be very interesting because it kind of just gives you an idea of what it's like to go like from a PhD into the industry or go from like your master's into the industry. And it's gonna be very like fun, engaging panel. So I think it's gonna be super helpful. All of these ones are gonna be very nice to go to.
Can
Um,
I add another quick plug?
yes.
So in Region 7, we're going to have the Shetinas Conference in Atlanta, and that's going to be really exciting. But we wanted to tailor that a little bit more to graduate students. So I'll be presenting in 3 weeks, something like that, on imposter syndrome and navigating setbacks in your research. So if you're in the area, I highly recommend. There are going to be other workshops, keynote speeches, and many ways to network with people in the area. I know some people are going to be coming from outside of, so if you're in the vicinity, feel free to pull up.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be there, so I'm excited to see your workshop. And then the next thing is if you're not in the grad WhatsApp community, please join by scanning this. If not, I'll send it in an email with the slides and everything. Or Region 4, what Instagram is this? I'm sorry, I didn't put the Region 7. We also have a post-event survey, so if you're able to fill it out, that'd be great, just to let us know like how we did and how we could do better. And then we have some Region 4 resources, but now I'll open it up for some Q&A. And if there's no questions, that's totally fine.
I have a question.
Go
I
for it.
sometimes, I'm very used to like presenting my work at like my research advisor on the like weekly updates and whatnot. And I don't know, did you ever struggle with this kind of conversion between like presenting to your advisor who's looking for very specific things to like presenting to a broader audience?
Something someone once told me was try and present it as if you're presenting to like your parents or someone outside of your field. And you know your parents pretty well and what they'll be able to understand. So you can tailor your slides to kind of that kind of discussion. So it really breaks it down um, to kind of the basics to what maybe you'll scale it up a little bit to tailor it towards engineers. But that's kind of where I start. And it's something that I've gotten a lot of practice with. So I'm used to breaking things down, especially my research, but it's mostly so I can understand what I'm doing because sometimes I don't understand what I'm doing. Um,